Hello and welcome to the third video about tutorial 186, and in this video we're going to be looking at the second function, and that is the function that uses the drawing object. So if you remember, if you've seen the other videos, this tutorial 186 is all about finding inside or outside bars and then continuing the high and the low until it's broken by price. You can see a good example here. We have an inside bar, this one here, and we're taking the high of the bar that encloses it and the low of the bar that encloses it, and we're continuing those along until they're broken by price or there is a new inside bar. And we would determine whether we're looking for inside or outside by the values that we feed into the function, and the function is called by a little indicator, and you can see here we're calling it using its name, and then we've got high and low, and then we've got this value true. So true means inside bar. If we made it false, we'd be looking for outside bars. So let's have a look at the function itself, and as I say, this is using drawing objects. So I'm just going to go down into the program. So the main thing in the program is I've written a little method that draws the trend line, and we're doing that. I've done this on minute charts, so we're able to use the date and time as inputs. So what I've done, I've drawn the line using an input of date, time, price, then date 2, time 2, and price 2. In other words, the two ends of the line, and also color. And then we've done that using this code here, and that returns a trend line. We need to return the trend line, not to draw it, but you'll see we use this value later. Particularly, we're using dt point in this function, so effectively we're converting the date, time and price into a dt point. We don't want it to persist because we don't want it to rewrite itself over each tick or redraw itself each tick. And I've just set the style and the weight here. You could potentially change these or make them into inputs if you wanted to. The first thing we do is we determine if it is an inside bar or an outside bar, and I've put what I've been defining as the inside and outside bar here. And what we're saying is if that user input is true, then we look for an inside bar, otherwise it's false and we're looking for an outside bar. So I'm just going to skip beyond this extend section because we're actually going to draw the trend lines first. So if it is an inside bar or an outside bar, then we get into this begin end statement. And then if it is an inside bar, in other words, we set true, then we do the following. The first thing we do is we set the object, the trend line object, we save it in a temporary object for both the high and the low. Now I'll explain a little bit more about why we're doing that in a moment. Then we store the high and the low of the inside bar in this value ISOS current high and ISOS current low. Then we draw the trend line, and this is just the little trend line. The little trend line, if we look back to the chart, this is this little, in this case cyan trend line. It's just showing where the inside bar is, and we're doing that with date time, and date time 1 bar ago, and then the high 1 bar ago plus low 1 bar ago divided by 2. And we also want to start the high and the low trend lines, so we're doing that using similar syntax, but we're now using the ISOS current high, in other words this value, and the ISOS current low. And then when it is not the last tick of the bar, in other words all the other ticks in the bar, we restore the previous object into TL obj high and TL obj low. And the reason we do that is because with an inside bar can be an inside bar one tick, and then it's no longer an inside bar because that second bar could suddenly have a high higher than the high of the previous bar, or a low lower than the previous bar. So what will happen in that case is the pattern will disappear from the chart. However, If we didn't do this, it would be left with the object of the thing that was previously there, which is no longer there. So we need to save those values. Then for the hour sidebar, in other words, IB is false, we do something very similar. We don't need to store the objects into a temporary object, because once something is an outside bar, it's going to stay an outside bar. So all we need to do is keep a record of the high and the low of the pattern, draw the midline, and then draw the high and the low lines. And then we reset this value, stop IS OSH and stop IS OSL. We'll be using those in a moment. Now, as we go along, we need to extend some lines. So we just saw those values were saved as false. So for example, let's just look at the stop IS OSH is false. So what we do, we check that we have an object, there is actually something exists, and if there is, and OS bar is false, and that just stops us drawing the line slightly too long. Then we set the endpoint of the TL obj high using this syntax. And if you were to right click on set endpoint and look at the definition, you're going to find some more information about the syntax and how we would go about using that. But we're basically putting in a DT point, and we're creating that DT point using the datetime dot from el datetime DT and the high value. And then we do something very similar for the low. So what happens when the high exceeds the high of the inside outside bar and the low goes under the low? Well, what we do is we just check all the time is high greater than ISOS current high, and stop ISOSH is false. Then we set the stop ISOSH to true, and we make the object, we set that to null. So that's monitoring when price goes over the line, and when it goes over the line, effectively we now have a situation where the stop IS OSH and the stop or the stop IS OSL, because they're independent, they are now true. Just look at that again. You see true, true. They're true, so we no longer extend the line. And then the final thing is, because we don't have too many drawing objects on the chart, we're using some syntax here to make sure that if the count gets over 4999, then we delete the oldest drawing object, and then we return a value, just because this is a function. Just to let you look at the variables and the inputs if you want to try this tutorial program yourself, and also the namespaces. And bear in mind again, or look again at the indicator, and you'll see this is how we call the function. Now, I've only tested it with high and low here. Conceivably it could be used with other price series, but I have not done so, so I cannot say if there are any issues with doing so. Anyway, I hope this was useful for you. Please see the other videos. If you're interested in learning easy language, then please go to markplex.com and join the Markplex email list, and also subscribe to this video channel. Thank you.